Hi, guys, and welcome. This is Jen Gata Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, this is Jen Gata Siciliano, your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. Thrilled to announce that we have a new, fresh author coming out and giving it her all. She has 3 books that are coming out this year. One of them is already out. Her name is Delicia Niami, and it's all about trauma and her recovery from it. So, Delicia, I'm thrilled to have you on board. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So let's get right to it. The first book of this 3-part series, okay, is called Kissing Asphalt. And I just listened to the audiobook, and I think it's really brave of you to come forward with this information. Okay. It's a memoir. It's a 3-part memoir, really.
Yes, it's a 3-part memoir, correct. It's called Resilient AF is the title of the series. And the first book is Kissing Asphalt, like you said. The next one coming out, hopefully this May, I'm doing the final edits right now, is Not My Circus. That's the second installment. And the third one, hopefully by September, The Queen of Silver Linings. So
terrific. Now, Kissing Asphalt, we're going to go into the detail of this so that people know what to expect and what they're getting into. But also, we'll touch upon the others as well, because you can kind of give us a preview of what those are about.
Yeah, you got it.
I felt so moved by your story. I felt, I guess, a lot of compassion for what you went through, but also this sense of victory at the end, the way you presented it, and then the way you kind of resolved it at the end. And, before we get to, I'm not going to give away the ending because that's kind of like a little bit of a shock towards the end. And I think that people should get there on their own. But I certainly want to touch upon all of the trauma that you experienced.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, I would have to say as early as 4 when my father kidnapped me and my brother and took us to Baghdad for.
Okay, perfect. So it was 4 when you guys went over there. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what happened? Why did your father take you away? What occurred? What was that like? And how long were you over there?
So my mother and father were together for 10 years, and they were in the midst of a separation, getting a divorce. She had a new boyfriend and was on a ski trip to Big Bear, and my aunt was watching us. I was playing on the front lawn with my brother, and we never really saw our dad at this point. Because of what my mom was already seeing somebody else, and I guess he was angry about that. And I didn't understand it at 4, so we were really excited that we were going to go get to spend Easter break with our father. And so we were playing on the front lawn. We saw his car drive up, and he pulled up and said, "Come on, kids, let's go." And my brother was 7 at the time. And he said, let me go get our bags. And our aunt was in the backyard, I guess. So she didn't know any of this was going on. And our father said, "No, come on. I already got your stuff already packed. Let's go. We're going to Disneyland." So, of course, then we got all excited. We just hopped in the car. We didn't think twice about telling our aunt that we were leaving. And since my brother was a bit older than he noticed when we got to LAX that something was awry. And so he asked our father, "Why are we at LAX? And this isn't Disneyland." And he said, "Well, we're going to Disney World, son."
Yeah.
So then we got all excited again. And, several hours later, we woke up in Baghdad, Iraq.
A lot farther than Disney World.
Yeah. And the minute he got us onto Iraqi soil, my mother lost all rights to us.
Now, it's amazing that that is the case, because it almost is. At some point, it seemed as though he gave in to your mom and returned you guys, right? And so he did that upon his own, because I guess America couldn't do anything about it.
No, he kind of sort of yes and no.
Okay.
So he did it on his own, but I think he had ulterior motives because he wanted to come back to America.
Mm.
So basically, when after my mom passed, I got a binder uh, from her, and it had every piece of correspondence between, I mean, down to receipts that she paid people, private detectives, CIA
Wow.
agents, FBI agents, like lawyer letters back and forth between them. That's how, in the beginning of the book, I have that letter, how he told her how we were gone, and
Yeah.
I knew he had mailed it from where he mailed it because I was looking right at it. I had the letter in my
Wow.
possession. So yeah, it's kind of crazy to go back and look through all that stuff, but I was able to see a lot and piece a lot together from that. So it
That's
was
really amazing. So when you came in, when did you come into contact with that binder?
uh so
How many years ago?
I was 30, so maybe 22 years ago.
Okay, so it helped you. Do you feel like it helped you process what actually took place because you were so young?
You know, I think I looked at it back then, but I kind of put it away on my shelf and didn't really pull it out again. And
Mm,
it's funny because my whole life, from the time I was probably 20 plus, I sort of semi believe in psychics. And so a lot of my exes have gotten me presents to go see psychics as a present, right? So many of these psychics have told me that write your story, write your story, write your story. It's going to be made
wow.
into a movie, write your story. And I'm like, I thought my whole life, I don't really have anything to share with people. Why does anybody want to read about trauma, 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 and more trauma? Like, I didn't have anything positive to share. Let's put it that way. So I was like 48, I guess, and I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score
Oh
by
yeah.
Bessel van der Kolk.
Hmm.
It was so many aha moments for me, including the fact that everybody had always asked me about my kidnapping, and they would always say, "Oh, that must have been so traumatic for you." And
Yeah.
my response was always, "I don't know. I was four,
Yeah.
like, how am I supposed to know?"
Right.
But after reading that book, I was 48, and I had to pull over on the side of the road, realizing I've had PTSD for 44 effing years. Like,
Yeah.
whoa, and so
Yeah.
many other things that it made me realize that I wasn't crazy. Like, it called out intermittent explosive disorder. And when I read deeper into that, it happens to people who have been sexually abused a lot and sexually
Mhm.
molested. And I'm like, wow, I'm not insane. It's just like these feelings inside me are overwhelming. So, like,
Yeah.
I had to, and this is why I had to take the time to write an entire series, because I had to really show people what I went through my entire life up to the point of my healing and what I did and how the things that I've incorporated to help me be the well-adjusted human being that I am the majority of the time nowadays. So,
Yeah, yeah. And I am, it's funny that you say that, like, oh, well, why would somebody want to read about trauma? People want to read about trauma. Everybody experiences some sort of trauma. Maybe it's not as extreme as what you went through, but in seeing that you can rise above that, that gives people hope.
well, and that's why I didn't see that side of it at first. It wasn't until I actually went to Bessel van der Kolk's house and did like a weekend thing with a bunch of other people there, like group therapy, and it really opened a lot of aha moments and
Mm,
doors for me. And I started writing after that weekend because I realized that I could take my trauma and turn it into beauty by helping others
yeah,
realize that, like, everyone has always told me how resilient I am, but
yeah,
I didn't really absorb that, it
yeah,
wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't until that point that I was like, I do have a message to share, you know
right. You certainly do. I want to go into that idea of yours with trauma and resilience because one of the things that I found coming out, fighting the system, fighting just like this embracing of like victimhood in a lot of anybody that goes through trauma. as human beings, we're made to be resilient. And I think, though, people need that as a reminder. And that's why I was very attracted to you and your story, because, it's just so easy to be like, well, this thing happened to me and these are all my problems and I'm blah, 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 like, and just giving into it. Whereas I feel like you've risen above it. And I just want to read a quote from the end of your story because you kind of like sum it up so nicely. Like I was like, oh, how's she going to end this? Because it was just like kind of, it just seemed like all of a sudden it was going to abruptly end in 2 minutes. And then, because I was listening to the audiobook, and then I just loved the way you resolved some of what it was that you were trying to get across. And this is one of
Thank
the quotes
you.
that I enjoyed. I realized that shit happens and you have to learn to deal with it. You can internalize your shame, guilt, and pain, which I did for many, many years, or the alternative is to process and move through tragedies as they arise, diving deeper into your journey along the way. So, in a sense, you're like a beacon of hope for many who have given up on the idea that they can be resilient and find within this sense of, oh, I can get through this. I can get through this and come out on the other side. Now, how did you come to that point in your life?
It's just something I've always done. And something I didn't write in the first book is I don't know where the innate resilience came from. It wasn't learned. I mean, it was just in me. And one example I'll give you is I talk a little bit about how I'm bullied a lot
Yeah.
as a child. And there were days when it would rain outside and I would get bullied all day at school. And I would walk home by myself, knowing that there was nobody there waiting for me and that I would have to, make my meal and do my homework and do what I'm supposed to do my chores, load and unload the dishwasher, all that
Yeah.
stuff that I had to do. And I was I was genuinely a happy kid when I was by myself and
Mm,
people weren't picking on me.
yeah.
And like I would go in the rain and I would take my umbrella and dance in the street and
Mm.
sing in the rain and sing Gene Kelly,
Ah,
like spinning around when I was a little kid, and it's
yeah.
like I don't know where that came from, but I held on to it and I held on to it so strongly throughout my life. And it was really funny because I hadn't talked to my father. 35 years passed basically from the time I was 5 until I was actually 30 years. So from the time I was 5 until I was 35 was the first time I had met him again.
Wow.
And he had this saying, and when he said it, I about freaked out. He was like, "Today might be hard, but tomorrow is new and tomorrow is beautiful." And
Mm.
I'm like, wow, okay, well,
Oh,
maybe this resilience thing is innate. I don't know, but like,
yeah.
it was very it was interesting to me because I never knew this man. I never knew what he thought or what his philosophy was on life or that
Yeah.
life was beautiful, but I would say basically like the same verbiage.
Yeah. That's pretty intense because I wasn't sure what to make of your dad. It seemed as though it could have been partly spite that he took you guys,
Oh, it 100% was.
right? Yeah,
100%. I mean, he said so in the letter. He said, "Now, can I cuss on this show?"
of course.
Okay. So he said, "You fucked me, Lori, and now I'm going to give you the biggest fuck of your life. By
Yeah.
the time you read this letter, your kids are going to be in another country."
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, he knew 100% what he was doing.
Now, were you able to forgive him over the years? And certainly when you met him again at 35 until now, like, was there a renewing of the relationship?
So, yes, I tried. And you had referred to him as my dad, which is something I've never done. And one story I've been telling is like one of the most hurtful things that anyone has ever said to me in my entire life is when I tried having a relationship with him and it was very odd and strange, but I did try my best.
Mm.
And we were having lunch. I think I must have been about 46 or 47. And he said to me, like, "The one thing I miss is somebody to call me dad." And I
Mm.
said, "Well, I'll never call you dad. You've never been a
Mm.
father to
Right.
me. You were never there. Like, where were you my whole life? And he
Right.
said, and my brother's name is Namir Nile. He goes by his middle name now, but he goes, I called Namir. I said,
Mm.
okay, but I am not Namir. I'm
Yeah.
standing right in front of you, and he looked me dead in the eye and he said, to be honest with you, I just never thought about you.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's like something I thought about when I was a kid, wondering, like, he probably just doesn't ever think about me. He doesn't care about me. And that just validated all of that, and it was
Mhm.
like, oh,
Well, one of the things you brought up too is that there's this sense of in that culture that can be a little old fashioned, I guess,
little. Yeah,
right? I mean, they don't see women as being the same as men.
not at
So
all.
you were already in that category from day one.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that was my fear, right? That my father never loved me because I
Yeah.
was a girl. He didn't care about me just because I was the girl. And
Hmm.
he confirmed it all. And it was like, it was seriously like a dagger through my heart,
Yeah.
And it was only a couple years after that that I wrote him a goodbye letter and just basically
Really.
said, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. You've hurt me over and over in my life, and I'm not going to let you do it again. And yeah, he ended up passing away in 2020. I don't know if it was COVID or Parkinson's or both, who knows,
Oh,
but it
wow.
is what it is.
So both of your parents, who you speak a lot of, are not here anymore. But I know that Niall, your brother, who you were very close to growing up, you called him your personal archangel.
Yeah.
You also said to me a few months ago when we had touch base that he wasn't so happy about you bringing forward all of this information.
No, he doesn't care about that. He
Oh,
doesn't
he's
care.
cool.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
cool with it
yeah. He
all.
doesn't care about that at all.
Okay,
He's actually
good.
coming out with his own network on OnlyFans. So yeah, he doesn't care about that.
All right, then
Like,
he's all
trust me, he
right.
don't care about that.
That's funny. Okay, well, that's good that I'm glad that you have his acceptance because I feel that you were as honest as you can be without like really destroying anybody. I didn't see that. So I'm glad that like he's accepting of it and he's able to like stand by you with it.
Yeah, I mean, my brother and I have definitely had a rocky relationship. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we've gone 5 years at a time without speaking to each other.
Mm,
And he is, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He is difficult to deal with. He is a megalomaniac and he's difficult to deal with. He's
mm,
difficult. I mean, that it is what it is. And so I practice a lot of radical acceptance with my brother,
yeah.
which is a skill I learned in DBT and I'm so
Mm-hmm.
grateful for. And it's like I know my boundaries, I put up my walls, and I don't let him speak to me anymore the way that he would before. It's actually have been writing this book has been the catalyst for that.
Wow.
And I said to myself, how can I put a book out into the world to inspire and encourage others to not deal with abuse and trauma and overcome and be in an abusive relationship myself? I'm not going to do
Yeah,
it. So
exactly. Exactly.
anytime he name calls me or anything like that, I say bye and I hung up. And he's been a lot nicer since I told him you better be kind to me. But we've had our ups and downs. But I mean, in some ways, he's the greatest gift. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's my brother, and I don't have anything, no other blood family that I'm tight with other than
Right.
him.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting how when we set our boundaries and we have to teach people how to treat us sometimes, and then
Absolutely.
by saying no, that's a big thing. And in fact, I want to get to that word no and talk a little bit about your experiences with molestation from early on. I mean, I was just so like, when I was young, I had, there was never a molestation issue, but, there were like, there's always confusion. I don't
Mm,
know how it is today with these kids. My son is 17. He seems to be very chill. Like they're not doing what we did.
no.
I love how you let me just say this because I love how you capture like Gen X because we were always out on our own doing our thing. Our parents never knew what was going on. It was a totally different thing. So sometimes you found yourself in precarious situations,
Yeah.
unlike today where like everybody's tracking their kids and
Oh yeah.
it's a totally different thing. So I do want to like kind of bring up the whole experience that you had, and I would say experiences. It seems as though this it was a running like something that kept occurring,
An
reoccurring all the time.
ongoing theme in my life. It
Yeah.
seems to be, yeah, for
So
sure.
like how did you like it felt like at some point you just kind of swallowed the hard pill and you just kept moving forward even as a young girl. Now, in that, like, was it something that you were thinking about a lot and was it affecting you and how impactful was it with the way you coped through life and just how you perceived intimacy, how you perceived sex, like, and how you related to adults? Like, could you trust people? Like, how did the molestation color the way you saw things?
Oh, it colored everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Like, I don't trust men as far as I can throw them, you know?
Mm.
There's probably two men in this world that I trust, and that's like wholeheartedly, maybe three. My nephew Macaulay
Mm.
and my brother
Mm.
and my uncle Dennis, and that's about it, you know?
Yeah.
Other than that, I can't even hug a man without feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it has very colored my world. It has, and I talk about this in Not My Circus, actually. I
Mm.
go to Switzerland and I go to Europe actually in this book, and I I end up traveling to various places. One of the places I go is Spain, and I meet this girl in a youth hostel, and we're sitting on the street, and these two Spanish guys come up and sit down and start talking to us. And she speaks Spanish and English. And
Mm.
so I don't speak a lick of Spanish at that point in my life. And so she starts talking to them. Anyway, we end up getting in the car with them, and I'm very reluctant, but they tell us they want to take us somewhere. They take us to the top of the mountain, and I'm like freaking out, you know? And so you talk about coloring my glasses. Like, I feel like, oh my God, we're going to get killed. What are we
Yeah.
doing? There's no cars in this parking lot. The guys are like, don't worry, we own this place. And I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to get killed here, you know?
Oh my.
And so we go inside, they make us this amazing dinner, all the wine we want to drink, like this beautiful view of Barcelona. It's just an incredible night. And then I have fun for a little while, right? And then I start thinking, oh God, what do they want in exchange for this? Like,
Yeah, right.
you know, like, yeah,
Nothing's free.
exactly. I'm like freaking out, you know, and it just like they were complete gentlemen. They drove us back, they dropped us
Wow.
off. They got her number, like, but I was like, wow, like they sort of like renewed my faith in men a little bit,
Mm.
you know, and that happened a few times on this trip to Europe. And it was like, huh. And then I even talk about in the book how the things that happened to me colored my view and maybe like have eliminated me from getting into beautiful things in life because I'm so jaded and guarded
Mm.
because I don't trust, you know,
Yeah.
and I don't let people into my inner circle. And I'm scared to let my guard down in front of people and be
Hmm.
myself because I'm always afraid someone's going to leave or abandon me or not like me, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's tough. So yeah, it's definitely colored my whole world and this sense of self-worth. Like, at 7 years old, being molested over and over from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, from a guy that you know, was also somebody who you loved deeply as a father,
Yeah.
somebody who was the only person who was there for you times out of 10 when you were stuck in Hollywood and you needed a ride at 2 or 3 in the morning. Who would I call? I would call him, and he would
Yeah.
always come get me, you
Right.
know, and he would tease me saying, come get me. Okay. Like, he'd pick up the phone
Mm.
knowing what I was going to say. I'm drunk in Hollywood. Come get me. I can't call my mom. I would call him, you know?
Right. Because this was just a thing that kept occurring for you. And it breaks my heart because I could imagine a person might start thinking like, well, what is it about me
Right.
that's attracting
Exactly.
all this? And
Exactly.
obviously that's not the problem, right?
No,
We can't blame ourselves for things like this.
no. And if anything, it's made me very demisexual, which I just looked up this term like a few years ago. I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, I won't be intimate with anybody, you know?
Yeah.
And It's interesting. I'm going to talk about this in the third book, which is kind of my healing process. But I was with a woman and she would ask me, "Where do you go?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "When you have an orgasm, like, where do you go? You don't like you leave your body."
Hmm.
And I'm like, really? I had no clue, right? So she's like, yeah, try and pay attention. And she was totally right.
Huh.
It's like, I was like, whoa, I don't know where I went, but I went somewhere. Like it was like too traumatic for me to experience an orgasm. So my body
Yeah.
disassociated with itself or
Yeah.
something because
Totally.
all of the shame, all of the internal guilt, and that's why I started to say, like, my self-worth, that's where it starts getting built up when you're 7. So when
Yeah.
you have this guy talking to you, telling you all the things that you wanted to hear from the people around you that you're not hearing, like I was always the one that was dumb, that my opinion didn't matter. I always felt silenced, but this guy
Yeah.
was like, oh, your opinion matters. And I felt like we had these deep conversations, but it wasn't until I wrote the book, edited the book, re-edited, read again and again, that it finally hit me like a ton of bricks. And
Yeah.
that's when I added that last paragraph to that chapter.
Yeah.
And I didn't write anything forward in the book except for that last paragraph in that chapter because it was so important for me to let people know that what I realized was that he meant way more to me than I meant to him. He was
Yeah.
just grooming me and I was just his toy.
Right. And then it was that the person that was with your mom too?
No, different person. But he was with my mom. There is a part in the book where my molester does have sex with my mother and I
Yeah.
see them. I witnessed this. So
That was pretty intense
yeah. Yeah.
because it's like it seems that you had a decent relationship with your mother for all the times that she wasn't there and she was busy. I mean, she was working all the time too, trying to put a roof over your head. So,
Exactly.
like you could only do so much. Sometimes you're not present.
Exactly.
But I think that she loved you dearly. And I don't think that, I mean, I can't remember if it was clear in the writing, but she wasn't aware that this was
No, no, I never told her
right.
because of the shame.
Right, right.
And you're
Sure.
right. My mom was the most important person in my life. And that's why that chapter is called I Should Be Angry but I'm not.
Yeah,
Because everyone always was questioning, why aren't you mad at your mom? I'm like, my mom did the best that she could with the
exactly. I
tools
mean,
that she had available.
right. And we didn't have, I should say they didn't have, the women who were raising children that they didn't have then what they have today.
Right.
I mean, one thing though that I did pick up is, and it was funny because I was like, wow, you really stood up for yourself. Um, when she wanted to move for like the fifth time or sixth,
Oh,
seventh
yeah.
time,
I
right?
was done.
And you were just totally done with that, like midway through your high school years. And it was just like, how much can I do? And by you really lashing out and sticking up for what you needed, it seems that she finally said, you know what, maybe this isn't the right time to take a
She
new
did. Yeah, because she did the
chapter.
exact same thing to my brother at the exact same time. I think he was a sophomore in high school, the same as
Mm,
I was going into. And she said, we're moving to Maui. And he said,
yeah.
no, no bullshit. I'm not moving to Maui. So she ended up, getting him his own apartment and paying for the apartment while we lived in Maui. It was really kind of, he's 16 years old. She did
Yeah,
that for
that
him,
was wild. Yeah.
crazy. And he
And
ended up.
and he was okay, like living on his own all that time. And
Yeah, I mean, she had very few requirements, and one was don't drink and drive, and he ended up getting a DUI after we were already back, and she's like, "You're done, come home."
oh
So he
wow.
had to come back and live with us in Newbury Park. He was not happy.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
he was not happy at all.
We talk about this idea of, or I was looking at your Instagram account again, and you said something about trauma. The only way to deal with trauma is to feel it.
Yeah,
And I think that's just so important. And I know that you have an interest of, sharing your story, sharing your experiences with others who have experienced similar issues. What is a general course of advice that you might give to somebody who goes through something similar?
I
How to
would
heal.
say to make sure you know that it's not your fault,
Yeah.
that you did nothing wrong. Don't blame yourself because I
Mm,
spent many years internalizing my shame that I
yeah.
shouldn't have done, that has made me prude in a lot of ways. Like I'm not comfortable around sex or sexuality or anything like that. It just is not, it's kind of taboo for me now, and it's even though, he came and apologized to me, but like I think, reach out to people. Don't be afraid to tell somebody.
Yeah.
And if your mom or dad doesn't believe you, tell somebody else. Tell your
Yeah.
aunt, tell your teacher,
Right.
tell your vice principal, tell a counselor at school, tell anybody because nobody should be touching your body unless you give them 100% permission,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
And the only reason why I think like exactly what you said, why people are stopped from doing that, or they stop themselves from doing that is because of that shame, which is so sad because it's like you're, you are violated and yet then you're like shut down. And I think a lot of people from the shame, and then I think a lot of predators, they count on that
Hmm.
because otherwise they'd get in trouble more often. You know what
Yep.
I mean? Like
Yep.
it's like it almost it strikes me as being such a ballsy thing to do, to go and cross that barrier with a young person that's not consensual,
It
and then
happens.
just expect to be getting away with it.
Yeah, and it happens so frequently
Yeah,
because we don't talk about it in this country. I mean, I was on a
exactly.
podcast once where I talked about my mother's murder. I talked about drug use. As soon as I mentioned pedophilia, she was like, "Oh, trigger warning." And I'm like, "Really? Are you kidding? Like we could talk about murder, we could talk about drug use, we could talk about anything, but as soon as we talk about the real issues, of why these people are using drugs and why these people are creating murders to begin with,
Yeah,
which is probably because they were freaking molested when they were kids.
yeah,
So let's
yeah,
deal with the crux of the problem and start talking about it. It shouldn't
yes,
be so taboo,
yeah,
you know? And I believe after having conversations with all of my molesters, because there is a trustworthy monster, chapter number 2 in book 2 in Not My Circus.
hmm,
But I've had conversations with all of them, and I believe, and I'm not a doctor, but in my personal humble opinion, that it may be some sort of misfiring in the brain
mm,
because they truly believe they're showing you love. They truly believe they're not doing anything wrong. So
yeah,
maybe if we start talking about it, maybe if more research goes into it, maybe there's medication that people can take to
hmm,
stop thinking about little kids in that way. I don't
yeah, yeah,
know, but like has it ever been done? I don't know, but like I'm on a crusade to like stop the taboo. We need to talk about it. It's not a family secret. It's something you should tell somebody. If anybody ever tells you, don't tell anyone, this is our secret, bullshit. I'm
yeah,
sorry. You know, just
yes,
no,
absolutely.
no, no, no,
Yes,
and it
yes,
would make everything that ever happened to me worthwhile in my life if I could have one kid just tell their mom or dad, like, you don't touch me. Delicia told
yeah,
me you
yeah.
can't touch me, and I'm in charge of my own body, and I'm empowered to say no, and I'm saying no, you know?
Well, I have to tell you, I would want you in my corner if something like that happened to me because I feel like you're a fighter and you are truly resilient as fuck. And it shows in everything that you have accomplished with this 3 book series. What I will definitely do is in the show description, we'll have a link to your audiobook. We'll have a link to the things that you could get on Amazon.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah. And the audiobook should be on Amazon soon if they ever post it. I mean, we gave it to them same time we gave it to Barnes and Noble. So
Okay. And now you mentioned you just dropped a moment, but it's not in the first book about your mother's murder.
oh yeah.
Okay.
So that's the second book.
So that's the second book. So this is getting more wild.
Yeah, the reason I called the book Not My Circus is in the first book, I alluded to the fact that I wanted to be an attorney, that I wanted to be a judge from the time I was 5 years old. And then I spent my college years at UC Santa Cruz and I studied in the legal studies program. And I was a double major in legal studies sociology. And I was writing my senior thesis on the concept of evil in murder
Hmm.
in 2000 and at the end of 2000. And then in April of 2001, in the midst of applying to law schools, my mother was murdered.
Oh my.
So, yeah, about a year and a half after that, the trial happened, and this book ends at the trial, basically. But I'm sitting in the pews watching my mother's murderer just make shit up on the stand, like different story after different story. It was such a circus in that courtroom that I just sat there and like my whole world crashed down on me because everything I had ever worked for and all my dreams were shattered in that one moment. And I realized this is not what I want to do with my life.
Oh wow.
And I need to figure it out. Like, this is not my circus.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I mean, I almost feel like I feel very inspired by you because it's almost as if you went through this crazy life. And again, I can say that like loosely, but honestly, like it comes from a good place because my life was similarly crazy in many ways and not analogous in I can't really compare and say, well, we have all these overlaps, but it's just I feel as though if I'm now looking back, feeling strong in my on my 2 feet now, knowing that I am trying to be a voice in my world, in my field, it's like if I didn't have the life that I had, I wouldn't be on this path. And
Exactly.
now it feels the same for you that this is your path.
I finally figured it
This
out.
is how you're going to help so many people because there are people out there that need to hear this story.
I hope so. That's my whole goal, is to help people realize that we're all resilient. We can all make it through anything that life throws at us, no matter what. And we have to do the work. We have to work hard, but there's always light and joy. If we work hard enough, we can always find it, no matter what we've been through.
Wow. That's a big, big declaration. And I'm really thrilled to have your voice behind that because, I think you did a great job with the audiobook. I just want to say
Thank
because
you.
I felt like I was getting to know you, I felt like you would have been a person that I would have hung out with,
Oh, that's so cool.
growing up.
Ditto.
And it was just cool because like I really feel like you just colored so much of the generation and yet your story is so I mean I don't want to say tragic because you're rising above it. So when you I always feel like the word tragic communicates that it's something that is like you throw it away. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Because it's tragic. It's like, oh, but I don't see it as that with you. I see it as this thing that you had to go through to build this like body of armor, and you're walking forward and you are like a living, breathing chance at again this hopeful um example of what can happen if you have this resilient attitude in the face of trauma.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I actually do talk about that a little bit in the second book. I sort of came to an epiphany while I was writing again, that the first cat I ever owned ended up having kittens, and sadly it was a really bad flea season, and no matter what I tried, and every day I'd come home and there'd be a little dead baby kitten, and it was
Oh,
really hard for me. I'm
no.
very, very animal focused. I'm like, it's animals are my heart. So it was really hard for me. And I still had that cat for I had her for 17 years. But she traveled to Switzerland with me and everything after that.
Oh.
But I realized that having to deal with that kind of prepped me for the other deaths and the other hard,
Wow.
really, really hard things I was going to have to deal with, including the death of my cat and the death of my best friend
Mm,
and my mom. Like boom, 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 1999, 2000, 2001.
wow.
And yeah, that kitten thing happened in 93. So I think it kind of built the resilience up, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just interesting how life kind of is building blocks in a way when you look back
absolutely.
on it, you know?
Yeah, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? That's what
Exactly.
Nietzsche said. So it's true because, I'm a teacher and I see these kids today and God love them and I love them, but it's like they complain about everything. It's like I'm thinking, when are you going to start? And I work with middle school. So they're not little babies, but they act as if they are because that's how they get, I don't know, like extra attention or something. Like,
Attention, yeah.
yeah, it's like, when are we going to reinstill this, like maybe an old fashioned sensibility that pull up your bootstraps, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
keep walking forward and with your head held high. And,
absolutely.
in the face of anything, like why can't you rise above it? And I know it's hard. I mean, um, I don't want to belittle anybody who's going through a lot, in terms of any kind of anxiety, depression, anything that is overwhelming, any kind of post-traumatic uh issues relating to any kind of trauma, because everyone goes through it differently. But if we believe that you can't get over it, that's what's going to happen. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really
exactly.
what you put in your mind.
Or anything in
That's where it
life,
begins.
really.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Let me hear a little bit about this third book. I know it deals with a bit about your healing journey
Yeah,
and
so
things that maybe you used or came across that were empowering and helped you get over this whole crazy life of yours.
yeah, absolutely. So after I the body keeps the score. Kind of before that, I realized I need some help. Like I think I have a lot of anger issues and I need some help. So I was drawn to Sedona for some
Mm.
reason, and it's a magical place.
I always wanted to go.
It's you should. It's incredible. And every time I go there and see people, they're always like, "Welcome home, my sister." And I'm like, I'm not home, but it feels like home, you know?
Yeah.
But people have told me that I'm a healer, that I'm a transmutant, that I'm this, I'm that. But I've done breath work, I've done inner child work, I've done a lot of different things in Sedona where, I found the things that resonated with me, sound baths and
Yeah.
uh, all these different things. Ho'oponopono, I think it's called. I think that's what it's called. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. So all that stuff. In addition to that, I've done a lot of therapy and I'm still doing therapy. DBT, CBT, that has helped me tremendously. Art
Hmm.
therapy, all different kinds of therapy, like run the gamut. I'm not big on talk therapy, but like other kinds of therapy.
Hmm.
And then also I've done a lot of plant medicines, which have
Hmm.
the breath work and the plant medicines have been the two craziest experiences. I mean, and it's funny. I'll tell you a funny story. Like my brother, I told you he was a megalomaniac, right? So he always
Hmm.
knows the best. He's the best, la la la, right? So I'm like, he's explaining to me about doing toad. Do you know what this is? It's
It's is it a certain kind of mushroom or something like that?
no, it's actually toad venom that they go and squeeze from the Sonoran desert frog or
Wow.
something and then crystallize and you smoke it. And so my brother and my mother had issues. My brother always said my mom was crazy. He didn't want anything to do with her, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So on Easter, my mom called and his wife picked up the phone and she said, Niall, it's your mom. They hadn't spoken for a year and a half.
Hmm.
And he said, I don't want to deal with her right now. At
Hmm.
5:30 the next morning, she was gone.
Oh no.
So he never got a chance to say goodbye. So he called me after this thing and he was all excited. He's all, I think you should do this. It's going to heal you because I have Crohn's disease. It's going to heal you. And yeah, I think you're going to feel a lot better. And I went up and I waved goodbye to mom. And I was like, whoa,
Oh.
okay,
Mm.
um, so yeah, it was pretty crazy. And so he told me when he was doing this toad thing, and I said, it sounds like breath work. And he's all, no, 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 no. This is the craziest thing you'll ever do in your life. Well, but again, I'm like, okay, whatever. So the next Valentine's Day, he calls me. Oh my God, I just did the craziest thing. You can't even imagine. I this, I that. I go, Niall, did you do breath work? And he was like, oh my God, how does that get you? That's crazier than any drug I've ever done in my life. Like, I told you, brother,
That's
but yeah,
funny.
it's crazy how your breath gets you to those places, the
Yeah,
same places, if not more intense than the plant medicine.
that's
Like
amazing. I've
it's
heard
incredible.
amazing things about breath work. I've tried it once. I haven't taken to it that well. I mean, I enjoyed the experience I had, but I feel I haven't developed the practice.
Did you do group or individual? Because I
It
think it
was
makes a difference.
individual.
Oh, okay.
It was
Well, he
individual.
was in a group and he said the same thing that my breath work lady said. I said, maybe it's in our blood or something because my breath work lady, the first time I did it, she said, I came out and she was like, man, you went deep. She
Oh,
was like, I
wow.
was like literally talking in tongues and stuff, and she's like,
Wow.
I've never heard.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like I was talking in Arabic and German, like all these different languages. And I'm like, it was crazy. And so when he did it, I told him that, and he's all, that's exactly what that lady said to me. She
Oh
couldn't
my
wake me up for
God.
like 20 minutes.
That's
I'm like,
funny.
yeah, it's crazy. I had memories of me going back to Baghdad, like being my little girl. I could smell the smells and feel everything. And like, I could see that the whole time she was there, she was holding in her solar plexus just all the fear and the anger and everything.
Yeah.
And for an entire year. And guess what? I got Crohn's disease. Huh, shocking. Not
Yeah.
really,
Right.
So
Right.
I asked her like, hey, what do you want to do? And so we grabbed hands and I we both lit a match and watched the house burn to the ground. And then we like walked through the airport together, came home together, and like, I don't know. I've had some crazy, crazy experiences in breath work. And also like when I did mushrooms, and you'll read about all this in the third book, but I did mushrooms with the guy that was my brother's friend who introduced him to the guy who did the toad. And he wanted to heal me from like the sexual trauma
Mm.
and so he was trying to get me to go back to like the first time I met him and all this other stuff. But instead, my mother had a different idea and she wanted me to relive her murder. And I was like, no, I don't want to. And I even like was hitting my face, like, come out, I don't want to do this, And she literally, I felt her presence cradling me, telling me, Delicia, I won't show you anything that's going to hurt you. I promise you it's okay. Please just
Wow.
come with me. I promise you. And I was like, Mom, you better be telling me the truth. So I
Wow.
did. And I went back and swoosh, I relived it. And yeah, it was crazy. She did it to show me that she didn't suffer.
Oh, wow.
Honestly, I didn't even realize how deep that question was in me because during her trial, there was a giant pull down screen with blow up pictures on there. And
Oh,
one of the pictures that stuck in my mind forever and a day was her face was blown up, all purple, like, but you could see this guy's shoe, the bottom of his shoe was like bruised into her face.
oh my God.
And so, like, this question of whether she suffered or not was really kind of laying low deep
Yeah.
inside me somewhere. And I was kind of doing like I do with everything else, just pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it off.
Yeah.
And so she did that to show me she didn't suffer, that she
That's
went real
amazing.
quick. And like, yeah, it was tough, but necessary. And that's what
Ha-
I mean by you might have to go through the tough times and do rough things and like really dive deep. Like when I did the stuff with my brother, the toad stuff, I ended up doing it, and he was
Yeah.
with me in the room as my support, along with the shaman who was doing it. And when I came out, I had no voice. I was like, I couldn't speak. And
Wow.
and I said, why can't I talk? And they both just started laughing. And my brother said, I thought the police were going to show up. He goes, I've heard sounds out of you that I never heard in my life. He
Oh,
said there were
wow.
guttural screams coming out of you that he goes, it sounded like there was a triple homicide going on in here.
Wow. Well, you must have released a lot.
I felt like I went to the underworld and I kind
Yeah.
of unleashed on all of my molesters because
Yeah.
they're all dead. So I
Wow.
felt like that's what it was. And yeah, that trip lasted for 4 days. It was crazy.
Oh, wow. That's pretty
Crazy.
intense.
Yeah. The third book's pretty intense.
You ever do ayahuasca?
No, my body's always told me no, 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 no. So
Okay.
I listened, you know. A lot of people have told me, the guy who I did the toad with said, I want to take you to Peru
Mm.
and I want to do all these different plant medicines with you. And I'm like, I'm not doing ayahuasca. He's all, well, we could do other stuff. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah, yeah. It is an interesting thing because I've done mushrooms and weed and everything, but the plant medicine, it's like you have to allow it to show you the way.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it doesn't call to you.
Right.
It depends on if the plant has a message to reveal, and this is clearly something that needed to be worked through in these primal screams of yours, that you weren't even aware of, I think, right? In the
Exactly.
experience.
Yeah. I mean, I've smoked pot for a really long time. I quit for 15 years, but I started again once douchebag was president and pot became legal.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I was like, okay, well, I might as well smoke. It's legal now.
yeah,
And what are we going to have to deal with for the next 4 years? But I mean, like my whole life, somebody told me an analogy a long time ago was that you don't get high unless you hold it in. And I'm like, whoa, that's what I've been doing my whole life. I just been pushing it down,
yeah,
pushing it down, pushing it down. And like, I have learned that I had to deal with it, and it was
yeah.
hard to take that step and start
Yes,
dealing with it,
right.
and realizing like, hey, I might be a little bit broken. It's time to see if I can fix some of this.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to hear that you kind of brought in under your umbrella, under your wings, all of these healing modalities that I I push out there all the time because I feel like, I mean, I was totally taken over by the psychiatric institution, forcibly medicated and forcibly hospitalized over and over and over again. And it was like until I finally, took the path of just natural stuff and just working through my own stuff. My trauma was really induced by the institution itself, so it was like it's a choice at some point.
Absolutely.
It's a choice where you're like, you know what, I can do this and I'm going to believe in me even if no one else does. And for me personally, like the whole institution was just like basically like, no, you can't ever do this because you have this label. And I was like, I don't buy that. I'm not going to buy it anymore.
Bravo.
So it's really about at some point, when are you going to make the investment in yourself? This
Exactly.
whole world may not invest in you, and you may have had one experience after another that just slams the door in your face. But in the end, we're left with ourselves and we die with ourselves. So before we die, it's about living.
Absolutely.
Get busy living and get busy dying, right?
Right?
That's it.
Exactly. The circle of life.
I thank you for, visiting the podcast and sharing your stories. And I'm thrilled that you went and did the three because it sounds like that middle one's really exciting. And I mean, they're just all so different. And yet this is like one life. So it's like wild. I love the idea that you really pushed out like a whole kind of, you told your story about your healing journey because again, everybody's healing journeys should be recorded and thrown out there because there's plenty of us that need to heal and we need to
Oh,
hear how
absolutely.
other people do it.
Yeah.
I wish you all the best of luck. I really like, especially after talking to you today, I feel that this is possible, that you could really make this into a movie.
That's awesome.
I'm going to read that second book too. And then maybe we could have another get together and
I would
another
love
podcast.
to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So listen, Delicia, thank you so much for joining the show. I hope that many people come across your words of wisdom and really get inspired by your vision and your resilience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.